Let's start by setting our motivation. So just connect to the body for a moment. Settle the mind for a moment. And then invite back in or revive our bodhicitta motivation. Sangye chudam zogi chunam lai janchu badu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyan gi pe sonam gi drola pinche sangye rupa sho sangye chudam zogi chunam lai janchu badu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyan gi pe sonam gi Drola penche sangye drupa sho sangye chudon sogi chunam la janchu badu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyan gi pe sonam gi drola penche sangye drupa sho. And so just connecting with that inner support, outer support, and connecting with a deep sense of altruism. Okay. So last time we were talking about how the Bodhisattva vows address the tendencies of the three poisons and how a lot of the Bodhisattva vows directly counterbalance or prevent or remedy the tendencies of the three poisons being anger, attachment, and ignorance. And so some of the vows are very specific. This one addresses ignorance, this one addresses anger, this one addresses attachment, and some of them very clearly address any number of them. But the invitation for us was to really think how, like depicted in the wheel of life, how one leads to the other, and how they reinforce one another. So if you lead with ignorance, how does it reinforce attachment and reinforce anger and reinforce that ignorance again? If you lead with anger, et cetera, et cetera. And so just kind of going back to that slide from last week, thinking about your own mind, your own habits, particularly the last few days, when you've been out of balance, when you've been more afflicted, which one was primary for you? Just kind of sit with that for a second. Do you usually lead with anger, lead with attachment, or lead with ignorance? When you're a little bit unsettled, when you're a bit tired, etc., just kind of sit with that. And it might start very small. So anger might not look like anger. It might look like mild irritability, being annoyed, being a bit grumpy. Attachment might not look like a wild obsession or a hedonistic craving. It might just be a quiet neediness or feeling of emptiness, hunger, a kind of a small desperation. Could look like mild anxiety. And leading with ignorance might not look like a huge act of stupidity. It might not look like being completely oblivious to reality. It might just be vagueness, spaciness, dullness. So just kind of think about what you default to when there is stress. And so when there is one, can it lead to the others? Does it lead to the others? What happens to us? Do the afflictions team up, collaborate, reinforce? And then from them, there might be elaboration. There might not. But just using something that looks like a scholastic chart of some kind, this presentation of the delusions, and use it as a tool for self-awareness. Where do you see yourself trending? Where do you see yourself coming back to again and again? Having a look. Derived from ignorance, there is dullness, concealment, forgetfulness, faithlessness, etc. Derived from ignorance and attachment, there might be dishonesty and pretension. Derived from attachment, there might be avarice, self-satisfaction, excitement. From anger, there can be wrath, vengeance, spite, envy, cruelty, etc. From all three, inconsideration, unconsciousness, shamelessness, distraction. And so just sort of not being, overly sobered by that self-awareness, but like a little, some real self-awareness invited into this class today, right? Like a real honesty that says, I'm not going to have a pretense of being more on top of my delusions than I am. At the same time, I'm not going to identify with them. I'm not going to think that they are me. I'm not going to say that I'm a bad person because of them. I'm just going to use this self-awareness to fuel how desperately we need a practice like that of the Bodhisattva vows. They prevent these afflictions from arising to a certain degree. The more familiar you are with them, the more they do that trick. When you've already transgressed, when you've gone into those states of mind, remembering the Bodhisattva vows can recalibrate you, right? So when you're thinking about these, we need to be so careful to not take it for granted that we are good enough because we are polite, kind people, generally speaking, in life. Now, of course, you are good enough, whatever that means, right? Everyone is good enough. Dung beetles are good enough. Everyone has Buddha nature. Nobody is broken. No one is a lost cause, etc., etc. But we don't want to take for granted that our path is finished just because we're generally well behaved. Right? Just because we are generally peaceful, generally relaxed. We have our bad days like everyone else, but what can happen is that when things are not too bad, when you're just kind of in a okay-ish place in your life, there doesn't feel the same urgency or impetus for growth. Sometimes we only really engage with growth when we've made a terrible mistake or we've had a terrible tragedy. And then we work a while and then we kind of settle back into a norm and kind of take our practice for granted again. Does this sometimes happen, do you feel? Yeah, and it's so normal, right? But it would seem as though when things are peaceful is when you would practice more, and when things are stressful, you would practice less. But what winds up happening is that the stressful times kind of invite a bit more practice because it feels more pressing and urgent. And so what we want to do is to see how all of our worst mistakes started as a very tiny trend that is operating a lot of the day. And if we catch it when it's little, it settles. When we catch it when it's little, it dispels. And it saves so much time if you have mindfulness that is aware of what you're saying to yourself, yes, but also the moods that are encroaching, because it's something that can get ahead of steam and then you have less and less power to control your mood when it escalates, right? And then the way in which the other delusions take over. So my own teacher, who does not speak very good English, famously says, attachment going, anger coming, right? So basically when attachment doesn't get what it wants, you're mad, right? right? And it's as simple as that, right? And you think I'm mad out of nowhere or I'm mad for good, valid reasons, when in fact, most of the time, we are mad because attachment didn't get what it wanted. And attachment could never get what it wanted because it was based in exaggeration. So the plans of attachment were always doomed to fail. If your tendency is not to be angry because of your thwarted attachment, sometimes your thwarted attachment leads you to an ignorance that makes you disassociate. I didn't get what I want. I never get what I want. No one ever understands me. No one ever will. I'm just going to curl up into a hole and not cause any trouble. I won't be any trouble to anyone, but also you better leave me alone. Right? Which is like kind of like depression, but it's got anger to it. You kind of imploded instead of exploded. So when attachment doesn't get what it wants, it implodes or explodes. Sometimes it goes into a more disassociative, vague, quiet, ignorant place. Sometimes it goes into a hungry, needy, kind of sad place. And sometimes it roars. Sometimes our anger is cold, icy anger. Sometimes it's boiling, hot fire anger. But they're all weaving into one another and reinforcing each other. And so we sometimes can have a bizarre type of pride about which afflictions we have. Like, I'm not an angry person. Sure, I have my attachments, right? Or I'm not an ignorant person, but sure, I get angry when it's justified, right? We have a weird sort of, I don't know, like they're in competition. They're all really bad, okay? They're all really bad. And they team up. They team up, okay? So when we have the depictions of like the snake and the pig and the bird, it can help you externalize a little bit and say, these are the troublemakers. I have them, but everyone has them. They are not me. They are not them. They are the troublemakers of life. And so when people are behaving badly out of their afflictions, if you can similarly see it as those are the three poisons at play, not why are people such jerks, right? You know why. They're suffering and they have afflictions. And then they have habits of perpetuating suffering and afflictions, just like us. So immediately you soften. So as you were thinking about this during the week, or if you had time to think of it during the week, or even just now in this session, could you point to your most prominent affliction of those three? Sometimes they're in balance and you just kind of rotate through them as the week goes by, but usually we kind of start to trend with one. Um, does anyone feel comfortable sharing how one led to the other, but you seem to start with the same guy? Yeah, Eleanor, please.
Can you hear me?
I can. It's a tiny bit muffled, but I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, um, I'm thinking about something that happened during the week, and my first response was, "This is unjust." It happened to a family member, and I
Mm,
felt that this was really unjust and wanted to do something about it, and felt the anger inside me that somebody could treat somebody else in such a way. So that when you were talking, that I was able to let that out a little bit more clearly, which was really good. Because
mm.
sometimes my head's a bit fuddled, so being able to do that was an excellent way of doing it. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, we have such a habit also of needing something like anger to get us to have action, And so
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
the only way we know to remedy a misdeed or an injustice is to wait until we're angry enough to do something. And that is kind of like culturally conditioned in us. And to train yourself to act from compassion means you're acting from a place of peace and contentment and wisdom. But normally, when we have peace, contentment, and wisdom, we don't feel like doing anything because nothing's wrong. Right? And so we really have
Mm.
to train ourselves to act from a place of peace. And it feels counterintuitive because that like lizard brain animal side of us says if you feel peaceful, you don't need to do anything. It's only when you're upset do you need to do anything. Yeah. So it's somehow
Mm.
like name the injustice for the injustice that it is, and then manage the way anger co-ops a clear observation and makes it its own. And say, okay, here's a clear observation. Now I need compassion to address it, even though I'm used to anger being my fuel. And it's so hard to retrain. It's so hard to retrain. But yeah, just kind of sitting with what do I lead with? Because some people, when they see injustice, lead with a whole other affliction. It becomes too hard basket. They freak out, they get overwhelmed, and they just kind of shut down and freeze and won't look at it. Or they get an attachment response, which says, how can I get everyone on my side? And blah, 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 you know? And so sometimes also we assume that our reaction is the normal or necessary one. Um, Forgetting we all kind of lead with a different affliction just given our own past. Yeah, it's interesting to explore.
Mm.
Yeah, sorry, Brenda, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Um, this week was always going to be a busy week. Everything was, things were already planned. But suddenly, people were calling me, asking for help with this and that, with the plumber, with their electricity bill, with I don't know what, I don't know which, mainly because they don't speak Spanish. So
Mm.
I'm the go-to person that they rely on. And that I'm usually very, very happy to help with these things. But this week, there's been in the back of my mind, I just want to be left alone. I want my own time. And I've had to say to myself a phrase that I heard you say many years ago, which I still comes into my mind quite often: for all sentient beings. For all sentient beings, Brenda, for all sentient beings, just do it. Um, and once I could turn that round and say, this is, these people need help. You can do it. You can sleep later. You can rest later. It felt very, very different. But I suppose that that it was a thwarted attachment because I just wanted to get on with what I had planned.
Yeah.
So there was a kind of vagueness. I'm not sure I would call it, well, yes, obviously it was anger, wasn't it? In a mild kind of way, just leave me alone. But there was also that sense of pulling back, of
Mm,
saying, I don't want to do this. And
yeah.
I can feel it inside.
Yeah.
And but it was worth it. It was really good to be able to notice it and to observe it. And thank you for that suggestion that you have made repeatedly over many, many, many teachings, to notice it when it comes up and then say, no, you could do that. You know, I think you said last week, my mind is trainable, my mind has potential.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. Well, and you're really nailing that visceral feeling of self-cherishing, the self-cherishing that a nice, polite person has, that's not going around being a horrible neighbor, being a destructive force in their family, embezzling money from their workplace, you know, just like a nice, regular person who's like not up to mischief sort of level of self-cherishing, um, which is leave me alone. Leave me alone is kind of the mantra of self-cherishing. It's either leave me alone or tell me I'm amazing, right? But, you know, a lot of the time, there's this justification of, I don't want to cause any harm. I don't want to cause any trouble. I just want my peace. That grumble which sometimes increases in volume as we get older. And we all remember being like little kids and there being like a neighbor somewhere who like was really a vigilant sort of person about the neighborhood who's always looking out the window and like, get off my lawn, you know, like the grumpy old man across the street that the kids were afraid that their ball would go into their yard. Yes. And then we don't see that we're becoming the grumpy old man. Like, no, no. Remember being 5 and your little ball rolling into the grumpy old man's yard, right? But that's that kind of seemingly benign self-cherishing that keeps us feeling disconnected from our fellow human. And it keeps us feeling kind of alienated and isolated, but we can find a type of peace in it. It's like a compromised piece. It's not as good as it could be, but it's kind of quiet in there, right? And it really fears disruption, and it gets really annoyed with disruption. And that one feels like it's our protector. It's protecting our peace. It's protecting our energy. It's protecting our space. It really feels like our protector. And then exactly as you described, when you widen and when you do the thing you didn't want to do, but you do it because you know it's important, you actually feel a lot better, right? Less self-cherishing means more happiness. But it's a lie, because self-cherishing is saying, no, 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 you'll only have happiness if you listen to me. And to be able to really, really honor self-care, looking after your body, looking after your mind, from a perspective of this is a vehicle for others. It's a difficult dance, because it's so easy to fall into martyrdom and like, no, 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 you first, you first. Or, damn it, I've had enough. I've been helping people my whole life. Now's my time. You know, we kind of go back and forth, right, between martyrdom and everyone go away. Yeah, but to be able to view this vehicle of body and mind as something for others, therefore we need to take care of it really well. It's a little bit like when you're a grown-up who has to share an actual car. And I don't know if anyone else has this experience, maybe even just with your spouse or something, but in a nuns community, there's often like the one car that, like, you know, 10 of us share or something. And because it's our car, we're really conscious about like not leaving rubbish for the next person to encounter, making sure it's nice and clean, getting the oil changed on time. And there are things we would do for our own car, but we're probably more proactive because it's the community's car. Yeah, we're a little bit more careful because it's the community's car. But if we were a teenager, we would probably be less careful because it's the community car, right? So it's like self-cherishing is the teenager, right? That says, oh, it's someone else's, doesn't matter, right? Right. But we want to go into the other view, which is that this is like communally owned, but I'm the custodian. Yeah, so I'm the custodian of this particular set of matter and this consciousness. I'm the custodian of that, but it's for others. So I need to really look after it well, because this is for others. If it's only for me, I can eat as much crap as I want, I can stay up as late as I want, and I can be a total teenager because it only hurts me. Yeah, and it gives me immediate satisfaction to eat junk food and stay up too late. So even if I have a consequence the next day, who cares? So much of getting over self-cherishing is a process of like deep maturing, a type of maturing that some people don't do their whole life. They never do. Or maybe they have their peak of it when they're, when they're looking after their children, and then when their children leave home, they revert and they go back to a more self-centered way of being, because they don't have that little person constantly in their life who needs them to step up. You know, it happens in different phases, but we know that growth isn't linear for everyone. And so how do we orchestrate growth? How do we orchestrate maturation? It's like the container of the Bodhisattva vows keeps us oriented so that we don't give in to self-cherishing as regularly. Yeah. Was there another question? Was it Vivian? No. Oh, it was Nika.
Nika.
I had a question, and then you kept talking, and then my question was answered. So thank you.
Good, good. And my immediate metaphors and analogies on the spot sometimes are imperfect, but I think you guys understand what I mean. You understand what I mean. So self-cherishing is lying. And when we don't acknowledge the lie, it kind of blossoms into one of the afflictions. And then one of the afflictions will bring in the other afflictions, and then we're off to the races. And the mess keeps going and keeps going. So having the mind that is really aware of what that tiny little mantra of self-cherishing is for us will help so much. And for a lot of us, the mantra of self-cherishing is leave me alone. Yeah. Another mantra of self-cherishing is what about me? What about me? What about me? That one, like, like, ooh. But it's poignant because we do get lonely and we do get unappreciated and we do get, all these things that happen in a community or in a family, in a workplace, in a neighborhood, where sometimes we get neglected and we could use a bit of support. That's not true, right? But there's the one in there that says, "What about me?" That one, it will never be enough. You will get the validation and support that you sought. You will get the comfort, affection, and respect that you wanted. And you'll think, what else? Yeah, because when it's coming from that place, it's a hole that will never be filled. So many times in our life, we've believed our self-cherishing when it says, if only people would just whatever, then I would be happy. If people would just fill in the blank, then I would be happy. And if people actually do just fill in that blank, whatever the blank is for you, were you happy when you were coming from that place of deep craving self-cherishing? And then when you're feeling really well, when you're feeling altruistic and you're feeling abundant and you're feeling magnanimous and you're feeling happy with humanity, then if someone validates you, you kind of don't care, right? You're like, oh, that's nice of them to say. But you're not like, oh, I needed that fuel for my soul. You don't care in the same way when you're actually doing well. They'll say, oh, what can I do to help? And you're like, hey, right? Still good to accept help for their sake. But do you know how it switches in your mind? Right? When you're in the good place, people will give you everything you ever wanted, but you don't really need it now. And as soon as you need from that like desperate need place, even if you get it, you won't be satisfied. It's like salt water to quench your thirst. So Bodhisattva vows are for others, but the immediate benefit is for us. It's really overpowering the habits of self-cherishing, which says, I will give you happiness, but actually it doesn't. Yeah, or it gives short-term happiness with long-term cost. So these guys, what we really need in order to kind of put a lid on these, not suppress, but like prevent them arising, is to kind of circle back to the basic equanimity. So we need equanimity as an essential basis for bodhicitta. So this is from that Foundation of Buddhist Thought series, some of you know, from Geshe Tashi Tsering, who was based in London for a long time. It's a lovely series. He says, this immeasurable equanimity, cultivated within ourselves by one of two ways, based on either our wish for others' well-being or on our relationship with others. In one sense, we contemplate the fact that all sentient beings around us are tangled in a web of self-induced affliction and hostility, and we develop a strong wish for all living beings to be free of samsara and its causes. In the second case, we cultivate a mind that is truly impartial toward all beings, holding each relationship with the same regard and affection as the next. In effect, we treat all sentient beings with equanimity and develop a mind indiscriminate of affection and aversion. So whether the suffering and afflictions of others are the catalyst for your equanimity, or impartiality and thinking of the relationship is the catalyst for equanimity, we need equanimity if we're going to build bodhicitta on top of it. But I wanted to flag it because it's a word that gets used in Buddhism in a few different contexts, and we often mix it together. Right? So one place we see equanimity is in the Minds and Mental Factors literature. In Minds and Mental Factors, equanimity is basically a feeling of neutrality. Yeah? So we're not actually talking about that with immeasurable equanimity. Another place it comes up is when you see the picture of the 9 stages to calm abiding, that path that has the elephant and the rabbit and the monkey and the monk going up the pathway, and it's describing the 9 stages of mental abidance. The teaching for that is to look at the 5 faults and the 8 antidotes, because we love a list. The 8th antidote is applied equanimity, which means you're so good at concentration that you know when to stop applying antidotes. So in the beginning of your concentration, you need to apply antidotes to distraction, etc., right? But eventually you get so good at that that you might overdo it and apply antidotes when they aren't needed, right? And at that point, the antidote is called applied equanimity, which is rest in the confidence of your concentration at that point. So equanimity doesn't mean the same thing in all contexts, even though it has a general idea of kind of a balanced feeling. It actually, there's a different type of equanimity discussed in a lot of different areas in Buddhism. So immeasurable equanimity, it has an impartial attitude, but that doesn't mean total neutrality in the sense of making everyone identical. Right? You're saying some people I have a lot of rapport with, I get along with really easily, we have a lot in common, we speak freely. Some people I don't have a lot in common with, I don't have much to say to them. And neither of those are my criteria for goodwill. Right? Rapport is not what dictates goodwill. Relationship label is not what mandates goodwill. You're saying, I don't like you at all. May you be well and happy. You stranger, I don't know you at all. May you be well and happy. Friend, may you be well and happy. It's like, may you be well, may you be happy is the baseline for all sentient beings. You're not pretending that now suddenly everyone's your friend. And that's probably sounds quite self-evident, but it is a mistake that some people fall into when they're trying to develop equanimity, is they're like, oh, I see everyone is the same. And it's like, well, no, you don't. And to tell yourself that is a big lie, and it will make you weird to be with, right? So cut it out. Like your husband or your wife is not the same as your child. Your child is not the same as someone else's child. These are all different relationships. We don't have to be weird and pretend that's not the case, right? But what we're trying to say is everyone is equal in needing happiness, not wanting suffering, and having the drive of those. Right? The drive of not wanting to suffer, the drive of wanting to have happiness. And then the details vary. So from that basis, we think, well, may they be well, may they be happy in the deepest, deepest sense. So it's not like you want someone who has really bad habits to have the satisfaction of achieving their evil plot. It's not that. It's not like you're wishing them the happiness that they seek from their afflicted place. You're not thinking, oh, may that jewel thief be successful in stealing the jewels and being so happy about it, like we know any jewel thieves. But you know what I mean? We're not thinking, may that arrogant boss have the satisfaction of making everyone bow down to him. We're not thinking that. We're thinking, may they have the deep happiness that comes from the development of positive, constructive states of mind and the ripening result of those, right? So that's also where people get stuck. It's like, I don't want so-and-so politician to be happy because when they're happy, they've been doing bad things that hurt others. I don't want them to be happy. And you're like, well, we don't want them to have superficial sugar happiness, intoxicant happiness. We want them to have the deep contentment of the spiritual path, whatever form works for them. Does that sort of clarify a little bit, or do you have any questions about equanimity? Do you feel like it's necessary for bodhicitta, or do you feel like you could get away with jumping over equanimity? It's tricky. Yeah, I do want to work for all sentient beings. I really do. And then you meet one that you don't like, and you're like, except you. Oh no, I failed.
I had a teaching. I don't remember the teacher's name, but he said, "Why are you so obsessed?" My paraphrasing. Why you are so obsessed with having to like everybody liking you? Do you like everybody? I just thought, oh, that's
Oh.
not good.
Uh-oh. You're
But
like,
that
look.
sort of, yeah, it leveled my sort of attachment to not liking people. Just saying, oh, I need to approach this differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't have to like people's afflictions. That's the thing. That's sometimes where we get stuck too, right? Is it feels like it compromises our integrity and somehow to say I like so and so, because so-and-so has terrible afflictions that are really damaging to others, and you don't have to like their afflictions, but you do need to wish them well as a sentient being, who is suffering and who has Buddha nature just like you. So it's again like being able to identify afflictions without identifying with afflictions, not identifying people with theirs or you with yours, while at the same time being able to say, yes, that is anger, and anger is problematic in them, in me, in all of us. I don't like it. I don't have to like it. I shouldn't like it, but them I wish well. And that, it's simple enough to say, but in the moment when someone really annoys you, there's that block and your heart doesn't want to open to them. It almost feels like it costs you something to open to someone that you don't like their behavior. Because it feels like you have to like their behavior to like them. And we've fallen into the trap again of identifying people with their afflictions. So it's something deeper. Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, and I think that was just another step, much more needed, to sort of letting go of my big arrogance against people, because I realized whatever I dislike in people, I surely have the same qualities, or not lack of qualities, because I can also be quite annoying. So why should I be so annoyed at them? So
Yeah.
so that helped my step in equanimity. Still working on it, work in progress.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds Jungian how you describe it, yeah. Whatever annoys us in others says something about ourselves, to very roughly paraphrase. Um, there was a student in a class once who, when we were talking about this, he phrased it really well. He asks himself, why this? Of all of the rude things that people do tons of rude things. Only a couple of the rude things get under our skin, really get to us. So why this? Of all of the things. And we see this with the simplest of things, like if you've ever been in a workplace that has a shared kitchen and people's different opinions about how the dishes should be done, right? Some people care a lot, some people care a little, some people don't care at all, and conflict arises, right? But like, why does it get under your skin? Why this? And then we get obsessed with the details and the content of the surface story without looking deeper at what's underneath. Why this? So I like that one as my kind of key into when I'm feeling a little annoyed or a little irritable, or just like I feel my heart shutting down. Why this? And then to think of rude things that maybe your best friend does that you completely forgive them for and might even find endearing. Yeah, because there are all sorts of rude things that we're like, oh, whatever. We've made our peace with. Right? So that can be a helpful one. So equanimity is our project for the week, should you choose to accept it. Really thinking about, how do I have unbiased, impartial goodwill while still acknowledging surface rapport, surface relationships. I don't have to like everyone, but I need to wish them all well nevertheless. And how do I do that in a genuine way? And really play with when there is resistance to that, being curious about that. Because we know better, we're convinced, we think it's a good idea. If the world only had equanimity, everything would be fine, let alone love, compassion, bodhicitta. If we just had equanimity, things would be better. And yet, we do have this funny, you deserve my goodwill, you don't. Funny sort of thing that we do. And it's quiet, psychological, energetic, in the background, all the while being perfectly polite to everyone, generally speaking. But for some people, it's through gritted teeth. Why is that? And to really think the cost to your own peace when your heart shuts down towards someone, in a way it feels like something you're doing to them. They don't deserve your care and love. But really what happens is then you feel tense. When your heart shuts down, you feel tense. So it's in everybody's best interest, this equanimity project. So getting into the vows, number 4, and some of them we'll do quicker than others. So I know you're like, wow, time is a wasting and we're only on number 4. Don't worry, I have a plan. So number 4, abandoning the Mahayana teachings. by saying that some parts of the teachings, the Pitakas, are not teachings of the Buddha, and propounding your own fabricated or perverted doctrine. So the commentary from my teacher, he just a summary of it. Basically, this is a case that something is the Mahayana Dharma, but you present it as if it's not. And or you know that it is, but because it's difficult in some way, you present it otherwise. And or you throw it out yourself, like active avoidance and dismissal. Or there's the case that something is not the Mahayana Dharma, but you present it as if it were. So making up doctrine. Because you like an idea and you like Dharma, you conflate the two and present them as one. So we need to think of like some examples of this, because this might not seem to come up for people that don't teach Dharma, but we do express our opinions to our friends and family, and they may know that we're Buddhist, right? And they take it as Buddhist or Mahayana Buddhist. And so I think the latter case is the most common because we have exposure to a lot of forms of wisdom. You know, in my own case, I have exposure to a lot about Western psychology because of my family upbringing and the various groups that I've worked with over the years. And so sometimes the wisdom of psychology comes through when I'm talking about Buddhism. But it's so important that if I'm speaking about psychology, I don't call it Buddhism. It doesn't mean that it's not wisdom, but it's not Buddhism. Do you know what I mean? And so what we can do really easily is say, okay, I like this wisdom and I like this wisdom. They're the same wisdom. And you're like, no, they can work together and it's good if they do, but they're not the same thing because it can water down the benefit of both. It can compromise the integrity of both. Does it make sense? Sometimes people do this with some New Age ideas, or they do it with astrology ideas, or they do it with Ayurvedic medicine ideas, or they do it with beliefs they found in yoga and Hinduism, all of which might be fine in a certain context, and they like them, and they live by them, and they work for them. And then they come across Buddhist teachings, and they like them, and they love them, and they live by them. And then they mush them together in their presentation of Buddhism to a friend or family member. And it's best, if you don't want to transgress this vow, to say, my opinion is, not Buddhism or whatever school of thought you're speaking from. You're like, this is what I've come to through the various things in my life. A Buddhist might put it this way. An Ayurvedic doctor might put it that way. What I've come to find for myself is this marriage of ideas. So it's not like you can't ever merge the ideas when you're explaining them, but make sure it's clear. What are you saying? And it really is the most important if you are saying, Buddhists say, or Mahayana Buddhists say, and then you speak about something that's not Buddhism. Yeah. So we're really trying to prevent the degeneration of the Dharma, and we're really trying to keep the integrity of the Dharma. And that is so difficult because of many forms of wisdom existing that work together in tandem with Dharma very beautifully, and should and could, but those are choices that an individual needs to make. Yeah, how will I augment my own practice? Some people will want to augment it with a yoga practice. Some people will want to augment it with all sorts of different ideas. And that is good for that person. But if people are trying to be exposed to different systems of overcoming suffering and developing happiness, they need to be clear on those systems before they merge them together in themselves as an individual. Yeah, so it's not like we're against inner collaboration. It's that when you're presenting things to others, just even as advice, to kind of point them to which stream you're speaking from, and having a kind of a tidiness and a mental clarity about where are you speaking from. Does that feel good to you guys? Does that feel like it makes some sense? It's an easy trap to fall into with the best of intentions. So it's not like you can't give advice to people who want it. Please do. But if you're speaking Dharma, make it Dharma. If you're speaking something else, make it something else. And if it's some confluence of all the things you've been exposed to, say it's your own opinion and experience based on many things. Probably, you know, one of the worst examples of someone who was doing the opposite of this is someone like Osho, right? Rajneeshi. Yeah, the Rajneeshis, bless their cotton socks. and all of their Rolls Royces. So, you know, I'm in Oregon, so it's on my mind sometimes, the Rajneeshis, because they also wore maroon, and that's hard for me at the gas station. But anyway, so, you know, Osho took bits of psychology, he took bits of Hinduism, he took bits of Buddhism, he took bits of, you know, he took bits of beautiful traditions. He cherry-picked bits of beautiful traditions and presented them in a very articulate, charismatic way, and helped a lot of people until he didn't, right? Until it got real weird. Got real weird. Yeah, see, there are many documentaries. It's yeah, it was a mess. But the thing is that he was kind of presenting it as this ancient wisdom because it had lots of ancient wisdom in it. But really it was just his own ideas all merged together, mainly used to manipulate others. Right? So he's turned gods into demons, as we say. He's taken things that were medicine and made them into poison. And so we're probably not going to become like a creepy cult leader, I'm guessing, right? There's not any like burgeoning cult leaders here in the group, but we can be the sort of person that people turn to for support. And there just is a certain responsibility we have as people who are Buddhist to speak Buddhism clearly when requested to speak Buddhism clearly. So occasionally your friends might say, how do I start meditating? And your own practice might be a hybrid of many things. So what you need to do is then ask them, well, what type of meditation are you interested in? I do a little of this, this, and this. I could tell you the beginnings of this, this, or this, right? As opposed to saying, here is my practice, do it identically, and it's a whole merging of your own stuff. Questions or arguments or thoughts? You all look sobered. I don't know what you've been telling people. I mean, the other side is less likely, but it's like you say something isn't the Mahayana teachings when it is, or isn't the teachings in general and it is. What's an example of that? I don't know. Saying that we don't work for all sentient beings, we only work for Buddhists, that would be a big lie, right? Something like that. Yeah. Or that we don't believe everyone can be a Buddha. Mahayanists believe everyone can be a Buddha. So stuff like that. Yeah. Any questions before we go to the next one? Yeah, Vivian.
Hi. It seems like that kind of ties in a lot with some of the previous things in with the anger, attachment, and wisdom, and that we're working on that in order to be able to know what we're doing, what's on the path, and how we what we want to learn and how we're learning it. And so I think that, you know, mixing things up like that is wanting to be how shall I say, wanting to try and be something that we're not. So that kind of, for me, falls into that category.
Yeah. And why would we do such a thing? It could be out of any number of afflictions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
And
it's really good. It's a really good point.
yeah, it's our life, you know, right? It's right there. This is our life, and what do we talk to people about when we have deep conversations? And you know, and probably all of us have had moments where people have been curious about Buddhism because they know we're Buddhist, and they ask us something, and we might explain it pretty good, all things considered, you know, like what are the Four Noble Truths, or like what is this truth of suffering that Buddhists talk about, and you explain it a little bit, and they're really struck by the profundity of the Dharma. And what can happen is then they have their transference or their projection kind of activated, and they think, you're amazing. And you're like, well, Buddhism's amazing and quite helpful.
Not
I'm
me.
just an ordinary person. Right. And you're like, I'm glad it's working for you. It's not mine. But what can happen is you're like, oh, I like this feeling. People are thinking I'm amazing. And then you go crazy and become Osho. Right. Right. So like it's unlikely, but there can be that little spark of pride that again over-identifies with something that's not yours, you know? It's like, I'm glad that's useful. It's not me. It's the Dharma. It's the Dharma, you know? Yeah, so gently, but having this one kind of up in awareness can be helpful. So I just wanted to contrast it to one of the secondary vows. So I'm going to jump to secondary vows occasionally now. And the seventh of the secondary vows is out of hatred, laziness, jealousy, miserliness, a grudge, or negligence, not giving teachings to someone who is interested and sincerely approaches you for Dharma. You should not think of your own hardship in giving teachings. Okay, so this is the other way around. It's about when you should speak. When should you speak? When should you speak about Dharma? When people ask you to speak about Dharma. Right? So we don't proselytize, we're not missionaries. But if someone really has a genuine interest and asks you about something that you know about, it's important to share it with them. If you don't know about it, you can say, oh, here's this book, or here's this teacher, or I don't really know about that, but you give them some follow-up next step, recommended reading. But when you're just sort of tired and over it and someone's like, so what is mindfulness anyway? And you're like, oh, okay, so right, because you don't feel like the mental effort of explaining it to someone who doesn't have the context that you do, but they're genuinely asking you. And you do know, because you're a Buddhist who's been around a little while, you know at least a surface example. So it's when you've been asked to teach and you don't. So they're kind of partners, those two vows. What not to say, what to say. Yeah. So then number 5 of the root vows, taking back offerings to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or taking them by robbery or devious schemes, using for your own purpose material dedicated to the Sangha. So this one seems quite unlikely for us to do, except there are things that we might do in this genre and not realize. So we're talking about something that's been dedicated to the 3 jewels. That makes it property of the 3 jewels. So let's say there have been offerings made to a stupa or a statue, and you don't have the authority to take these things, right? Like you're not in charge of that Dharma center or that niche. So let's say that you do it for yourself and you know you don't have the permission to take this thing, and you take it through one of the various means, like asking someone to, or doing it deviously or whatever. So like that. It says something dedicated to the 3 jewels, so this means that the object might not have been offered yet. It may have been mentally set aside to be offered to the Sangha or the Buddha, for instance. The person concerned may have already decided, I'm going to offer it to such and such jewel, but the object has not yet been offered. It may not have been actually offered, but has been dedicated for that purpose. So if the object is something that's been dedicated to all 3 jewels, then you will incur 3 root downfalls. However, if the object has been dedicated or offered to a single jewel alone, for instance, an offering to the Sangha jewel only, you would only incur a single root downfall. So where this happens for nice people who don't generally steal stuff is at Dharma centers. If, say, you bought 5 apples to offer to the altar, and then people came over and you gave it to them instead. Right? Right? It could happen, right? You mentally dedicated it. This is for the 3 jewels. And before it got to the altar, you're like, oh, these people here. Right? It doesn't seem like a bad thing, except mentally you dedicated that way. So it's like you stole it from yourself, right? But you were the one that bought the apples in the first place. You should be allowed to do what you want, but you had dedicated them. So in a case like that, what you do is you offer them to the altar genuinely and really feel like the Buddha Dharma Sangha is happy with your generosity, and then you take them off the altar and then give them to the people, right? It's not like the people can't have the apples, but they need to go where they were going first. Yeah, when they've been dedicated mentally, that's where they go. So there's a whole genre of the karma section where we have to be so careful with offerings. Maybe people in nonprofits already know this from a secular point of view, but if someone offers something for a specific purpose, that's the purpose it's for. And karmically, it's incredibly heavy to divert offerings to other things. So if someone gives the Dharma Center a bunch of money for the roof, it is for the roof. And if the plumbing explodes, you can't then just use it to fix the plumbing. If you need that money for the plumbing more than you do for the roof, you have to go back to the benefactor and say, here's what has happened. Is it okay if we use that money for the plumbing instead? You need to go back to the original benefactor and get their permission. So then if you're someone who contributes to Dharma centers or to the Sangha, it's good to be able to just say, here is an offering for anything that you need, and kind of give open-ended offerings like that, because it makes it a lot easier for people to put the money where it's needed. Things like that. So there's a lot of things about mentally you've decided this resource, this beautiful thing, this whatever is for this. Oh, wait, no, it's for this because it's easier to do it that way. Because of convenience, because of attachment, because of any number of things. So not diverting offerings, particularly related to the 3 jewels, because they're such a field of merit. Yeah, Brenda, go ahead. Oh, mute.
Sorry, I forgot. I was saying this is really nitpicking on that one. Just supposing we've bought the 5 apples and we're on the way to the Dharma Center, but we see some homeless people and they're never going to come to the Dharma Center to receive the apples. But with the greatest compassion in the world, we see their need. How about that?
I think that, in that case, I think it's good to even mentally be like, Buddhas, this is for you, but you would know it's better to go to them. I think you just, even like a 2-second mental process of here and now here, right?
Yeah,
Here.
not to get too fixed an idea and be too rigid in it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I thought that was probably the answer, but I just wanted to check. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things like that where we feel like the immediate benefit outweighs the long-term benefit. And when it's things like food for the hungry, or clothing for the cold and sick and whatever, there can be a lot of arguments for, let's just address the immediate suffering in front of us. But there is something to very gently explore without neglecting immediate suffering in front of us, which is, what does merit do for your spiritual path and your development, so that when you help sentient beings, it's in a vaster, deeper way. But it might mean that today no one has benefited from you, but tomorrow the benefit is exponentially more. So, one analogy is like, you have a friend dying of cancer, you have no skills whatsoever in the medical field, so you can hold their hand and give them comfort, and that is worthwhile. Or there's a training that same day on how to cure cancer, as if that were possible, right? And maybe it is someday. And you have to let go of their hand, learn how to cure cancer, and then cure many people of cancer, but that one friend didn't get your care. What do you do? Yeah. So it's delicate because karma is complicated and relationships are complicated. But, there's something like, for example, Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe's vision for the Maitreya statue. Have you guys heard about this? They wanted to build this, like, I don't even know, like 13 foot, 15 foot, 20 foot, I don't know, giant statue of Maitreya. To create the cause for meeting Maitreya in the future, who is the next Buddha to show all of the marks and signs like Shakyamuni Buddha. So if we're not enlightened, by the time Maitreya comes, we'll be one of his first students and we'll get enlightened then. So if we build this giant statue that helps create the cause, that statue would cost millions of dollars, and he wanted to build it in an incredibly poor area. Why not use all of that money to feed the poor people starving in that area? Right? And it's a valid argument. It's a valid argument. So why would he do such a thing? Why would he want to do such a thing? And of course it wound up failing, and he just donated the land to His Holiness. Anyway, side piece. It was a complicated, messy situation. But his view, the way he presented it when he was alive, Lama Zopa, he said, okay, imagine there's this beautiful shining statue of Maitreya in this very, very poor area, how much tourism and industry it will bring to that area and help alleviate the poverty of that area. imagine the merit and inspiration of people seeing the Buddha of loving kindness depicted in such a glorious way, and the way such a representation would uplift minds and encourage practice. So those people might starve the next 5 years just as they were going to starve, whether we were there or not. But once this thing is built, it might actually help the whole area because of what it will draw and the kind of magnetic characteristics of holy objects. So it's tricky, right? Because it's like you've got $1 million and you've got a bunch of people starving, just feed the people. But maybe if there was structural change of certain types, then in the long term, fewer people would suffer in that way. So it's like not simple. It's not simple. And so choices like this, we just need to sit with our own wisdom and ask ourselves the big questions of what is the immediate benefit? What is the long-term benefit? What overpowers what? And not just have this like immediate knee-jerk thing that we do of I can't bear to see suffering. And it's actually we're wanting to soothe ourselves, sometimes even more than the suffering of the other person. We just don't like seeing pain. And they actually might be more fine than we know. There's also that. Like I got in trouble at work yesterday, you guys. I got in trouble because in Portland there's a lot of unhoused people, and there was someone who was camped outside my Tripa college where I work, and I was getting out of my car, and here's this homeless woman who's been camped there for about a week, and she has a lot of mental health issues, and she shouts at the sky, and she gets really angry, and unhoused people are suffering, right? And I had my lunch for work, my little brown bag lunch. And I said to her, "Oh, would you like my mandarins?" And I gave her my mandarins. And she was like, "Oh, thanks. Good morning." And then I went in to work. Seems like a nice thing. Oh, Yönten's so sweet. However, right? However, we've been trying to get this particular encampment to move to a safer area where there is like legal camping. Yeah, where there are resources for people that are unhoused. And lots of people who are unhoused don't want to go to those encampments because there's rules. And fair enough, nobody likes rules. But, but there are safer, cleaner, better places for them to be that the city is trying to organize. And the downside is you have to follow some rules. And so me giving them mandarins is kind of saying, don't worry, you can stay here. When of course all my coworkers have been trying to get them to move for a week. Right. So I fully undermined their whole strategy, yeah, by being like a little sweet in the moment because I didn't want to walk by the unhoused person and have them think that the Buddhist nun doesn't like them, right? So it looked like I did a sweet thing, but actually I made everything a little harder because there was a whole momentum to try and get them to move somewhere else. So that's an example of like my idiot compassion, right? That wasn't my deep compassion. That was my knee-jerk, right? Knee-jerk compassion. Better would be if I gave the money of those mandarins and even more money to the organizations that support the unhoused people. That would have been a better use of my resources. But of course, someone's in front of you, you just want to be nice to them, right? So it's a catch-22. It's a catch-22. But in this particular vow, it's when you have already decided or someone else has already decided. This goes for that. And that is a high field of merit, like the 3 jewels or representations of the 3 jewels. And then you divert it or you take it. So we just need to be careful that when we get something for a reason, that we are really clear, yeah, about how we use resources of that type. And if we're in charge of holy objects at all, even the ones in our own house, that we're just a little bit mindful about what gets offered there and then what we do with those offerings after the fact. Okay. So this one is abandoning or despising the holy Dharma by criticizing the scriptures or practices of any of the 3 vehicles of the Shravakas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, or the Bodhisattvas. If you have an inclination for Tantra, criticizing the paramita yana. If you were inclined towards the Mahayana, criticizing the Hinayana and vice versa. You should not criticize the difference in various teachings because the Buddha taught with skillful means in various ways to guide disciples with different dispositions. This criticism is heavier than destroying all the stupas on earth. So that's kind of heavy, but really, really important. This is the key part. The Buddha taught with skillful means, in various ways, to guide disciples with different dispositions. So when I got this teaching from my own teacher, he said this can even apply to like other religions, not just different forms of Buddhism, right? To think the Buddhas might have manifested as Jesus or Muhammad or various spiritual teachers to help people with those dispositions live an ethical life, a kind and compassionate life. We don't know which teachers were Buddhas and which weren't. So it's kind of a mandate to not criticize other religions. Now, that doesn't mean we can't debate philosophy. That doesn't mean we can't challenge ideology, but it's not looking down, right? So, an example of this might be, for example, in Sri Lanka, there's Buddhists and they practice beautiful Buddhism in the foundational vehicle, the Pali tradition, which is different than the Mahayana tradition that I practice. They do beautiful work, they have beautiful temples, they have beautiful meditators, they have a lot that's going beautifully there, even if philosophically I don't totally connect with all of what they teach. The side thing is, though, because of the culture of Sri Lanka and the different things, mostly due to, colonialism, etc., there is also sexism that has gotten into Sri Lankan Buddhism that has nothing to do with Buddhism, right? The Buddha was not sexist. The Buddha said everyone was equal. He was against the caste system, etc., etc., right? He was amazing in his time, but the cultures that Buddhism have moved into, they have their own history. So it's fine to say in Sri Lanka, some of the Buddhists have a sexist attitude, and because of that, they don't ordain women as nuns, or if they do, it's only at these lower levels and they're treated as servants, and that's not okay. But Sri Lankan Buddhism is beautiful. That policy is BS, right? We can say that, right? So we can also say Christianity is beautiful. The teachings of Jesus were beautiful. Some of the actions and policies and bureaucracies of the Catholic Church have been problematic. We can say that, right? So it's really being so careful with our speech that we don't take the mistakes of practitioners and say that means the religion is bad. It's so important for world peace to be someone who speaks in this way. It creates such a ripple effect. Yeah, even with your friends and family who are like against religion or hate certain types of religion, to gently be like, that behavior, that policy, that habit of this religion is really problematic. The main core teachings of that religion, however, are beautiful. Humans will corrupt anything with their afflictions. It's not the fault of the religion that the practitioners aren't perfect, right? The whole role of these traditions is to help elevate sentient beings into better forms of behavior and to really deepen meaning and purpose in life. So if that need didn't exist, religion wouldn't need to be there at all, right? So if they were already perfect, what would be the point? Do you know what I mean? So this one's tricky because sometimes we come to Buddhism because of being scarred by some other religious tradition. Quite often that's the case in Western Dharma centers with non-heritage Buddhists. Bad things have happened in other traditions and we left that and came to Buddhism. So by all means, criticize things that were harmful, but unless it is a core tenet of that religion, try not to criticize the religion as a whole. Yeah. Other forms of Buddhism, debate, play with philosophy, question, explore, but also know that the Buddha taught seemingly contradictory things, but they were actually levels of subtlety to suit the needs of different disciples, meeting them where they were. And so whatever level they get to, once they achieve the fruition of that, they will see what is to come next. We don't need to do that for them unless they're asking. Thoughts on that? It's tricky. Yeah, it can be tricky. Maybe it's not so tricky for some of you, maybe it's more tricky for others, but being really conscious about the way we talk about the other traditions, being really conscious about the way we talk about other religions in general It's important, and it's good modeling for our friends and family. So it doesn't mean we need to correct them necessarily unless they're inviting that, but that when religion comes up, we're very clear when we're talking about points of bureaucracy and when we're talking about general ideology and etc., right? Just to be a little bit careful. Yeah. I think for some of my family, my Buddhism has helped them be better Christians, right? They're kind of like, wow, she's really into this. I guess I could kind of get more into my own thing, and they're never going to be Buddhist, but they might actually be a little bit more ethical because they're kind of inspired that I'm so hardcore about mine, right? And that's good. It makes everyone friendlier, generally speaking. Yeah, Mika, go ahead.
I just want to share something. I'm doing volunteering at a community center who have a really Christianity base. And on Thursday morning, we always do reading the Bible. This morning I wasn't there, and they know that I'm a Buddhist practitioner. And at this moment, they introduced me. Oh, this is Mika. She's the house Buddhist. So that's the first thing to do. And I noticed that even reading the Bible, it helps me to be more to be more connected with the Buddhist teaching. So that's really fun to do. And sometimes it's when they ask me about things, and then I said, okay, I want to be really far away from reincarnation in this point, but sometimes it can't. So that's
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah. But it's fun. It's fun to to play with it. And what you were saying, so it's the teachings or the religion in its core is it's okay, but the things around it that people made of, so that helps me to see that also. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I mean, it also can help us be more realistic about Buddhism, right? Because we might have found the form of Buddhism that works perfectly for us, and then we get too idealistic because the ideas are so beautiful and think all of our practitioners are going to be perfect, and then come to find that they aren't, of course, because humanity. Will it devastate your practice to know that? Or is your own practice strong enough that you can cope with humans being humans? People in power will abuse power. That is what people do, right? And right. And then sometimes we come to this new format and this new framework, and we're Buddhist and we think that we're like above that. Like, why would we be? We're afflicted beings like everyone else. And just because our ideals resonate with our heart doesn't mean they've taken hold perfectly. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So what does it mean to criticize is kind of the pith of this conversation. So to kind of swap it now to one of those secondary vows again, the 16th one is about when to correct or when to criticize. So the one before was don't criticize. This one is do criticize, right? And it's all about when and how and why. So the 16th of the secondary vows says, not correcting the deluded actions of others when you are capable of doing so. That is, not pointing out somebody's negative habits of body or speech. When wrathfulness would be beneficial, not punishing a non-virtuous person to correct him because you think it would hurt his feelings or because of fear of his anger. So wrath is, generally we're talking wrath is a fierce, strong aspect that might look like anger, but is actually driven by compassion. Wrath gets used in a few different ways and gets translated as a few different words, but in this case, we're not talking about anger. We're talking about a fierce, assertive aspect when someone needs to be corrected. So keywords here are when you are capable of doing so. Yeah, when you are capable of doing so. So punishment is a weird word. Maybe I would like to say correction. Um, it's tricky because some people's behavior won't be corrected unless there's a consequence. So not necessarily a proactive harming, that's not what we're ever talking about in Buddhism, but it might be a taking of things that they like, right? A consequence. So what that looks like, that's difficult. The first part is more relevant, which is if someone is really doing the wrong thing and our relationship is such that they will hear us say the thing, even though it's an awkward conversation. If the relationship is such that they will not hear us, then you're just inviting a fight. You might have to do something else, especially if it involves protecting other people from bad behavior. So reading the room is always going to be a big piece of this. Yeah, Lars, go ahead.
I think you almost replied to that thought that I had. I'm reading Dakpo Rinpoche's book on the Bodhisattva vows, also sent out by mail as a suggestion to read. And he said in the book about that vow, secondary vow, if it has short-term effect, maybe avoid correcting because it will just antagonize people. If it's more like something that leads them onto the next life, but who am I to tell? I mean, I'm not wise enough to decide when and where. I just sort of say, oh, this is a good situation, and maybe the argument with the wisdom, but still, I mean,
Yeah. And there's like, when are you correcting someone because what they're doing is just annoying to you? Or when are you correcting someone because it's actively harmful to yourself or others and it needs to be said? So of course the latter case is what we're looking for. Just because you don't prefer what they're doing doesn't mean it needs to be addressed. But it's something to sit with if we think about our family and the patterns of our family. Where is there wiggle room to touch some things that have been problematic a long time? And where is there not wiggle room and it's just going to make things worse to bring it up? It's so difficult, isn't it? Right? Like when to lean in and be like, oh, this is going to be uncomfortable, but it might be worth it. And, ooh, better not. There's no opening there. Yeah, so skillful means is the core of when to really get into this, right? But what we want to be clear about is when we're avoiding conflict because it's uncomfortable, as opposed to avoiding conflict just, but it's the right thing to do, right? So avoiding conflict because it's uncomfortable is not enough of a reason. Yeah. If it's uncomfortable because your wisdom is telling you it won't work, fair enough. But is it like intuition uncomfortable? Or is it, I don't want to have a hard talk, right? That's so tricky. Yeah. But particularly if you're in any kind of role of authority with people, peers, you can correct each other if you have that kind of relationship where you have that kind of transparency and openness and want that from each other. But if you're in a position of authority, like a boss or a parent or something like that, yeah, it's some things can be nipped in the bud. Yes. So it's interesting. So there are times to criticize and times not to criticize is the summary of all of that. So then the seventh one is harming an ordained person, inflicting violence on them, stealing their robes, or causing them to lose their vows. This seems quite unlikely for anyone to get up to. It says here in the root downfall, if the Bodhisattva vow that if due to ill will, you steal the saffron robes, the chugyu, the yellow one we put on top, beat, imprison, or cause an ordained person to fall from ordination, then it's a very serious negativity. So of all of these, the kind of genre that might kind of come up is really, when do we undermine people's positive actions? So kind of look at what are ways we can all support others in attempting virtue, whether ordained or other kinds of virtue, as opposed to why might we undermine someone's positive practice? Because sometimes we do undermine someone's positive practice. So what this winds up looking like is sometimes, if you've ever been to Dharamsala in India, and you see lots of monks and nuns, and there's new Buddhists, and they're fresh, and they might have Bodhisattva vows, but not really have studied them very much. And then they get a crush on a monk or a nun, and they feel like it's a fun game to try to tempt them. Yeah, that is incredibly rude, right? That's incredibly negative. And they might be successful, and then you're like, oh, well, it's that monk's or nun's own fault for being tempted. Don't they have personal responsibility? Yes, of course they do. And if they had a few more years of ordination under their belt, a few more years of practice under their belt, then the same temptation might not be tempting, but you've robbed them of that by being a strong condition to awaken their attachment, right? If they didn't have the strong condition to awaken that kind of attachment, they might have kept up a really amazing momentum, and you've robbed them of that. So no one is a cause for anyone else's bad behavior, but we are a condition. Yeah. And there are people who are like, ha ha ha, I'm gonna tempt them and see what happens and show them that they're not so fancy, and like, what is that about? Right? That is, but I've seen things, people, I've seen things. Um, another case is jealousy. So sometimes older Dharma students who have studied a lot see a monk or a nun who has studied the same amount or less and be jealous that that person is getting more respect. And what's important to understand is the respect is for what we represent, right? We represent renunciation to each other, to ourselves, to you. We represent renunciation, and that is always worthy of respect. The person might not be anything in particular. If the ordained person, the monk or the nun, is behaving in a way that's problematic, you can say that. You can talk to them, you can confront them, you can, that's fine. But what they represent is always worthy of respect. So sometimes senior students in the lay community who teach get jealous of monks and nuns because we get that kind of respect, not realizing it's about the robes and what they represent, not about the person or their teaching ability per se. So that can happen. So not talking about ordained or not ordained, just kind of thinking about when someone's doing a good thing, do we ever try to undermine it? Do we ever try and undermine someone's momentum? Because we don't want to live up to that same standard, because we are jealous of the kudos they're getting, because of some weird competitiveness. Are there ways that we undermine the good behavior of others? It's something to kind of sit with, right? Maybe it's something stupid like you're in a car with someone and they really follow the road rules very strictly and they're very, very safe. And you speed a little bit in certain parts of town and you encourage them to speed a little bit because you're impatient. Something like that, right? They were doing something really virtuous. You were undermining it because of your impatience. Right? So, so it's like that's not transgressing the vow, but it's in the same kind of genre of why do we undermine someone else's virtue? Why do we interrupt someone else's momentum? And the better question, how do we support each other when someone's doing a good thing? So if someone's gotten the conditions together to do a 3-year retreat, we might be jealous and want to do a 3-year retreat ourselves. Rather than give in to that, how about you support their 3-year retreat? And it might actually create the cause for you to be able to do a 3-year retreat. And even if it doesn't, it makes you celebrate someone else's virtue. And it makes them more likely to be successful in their retreat. So, it's like someone's doing 3-year retreat. Let's give lots of money for their food and accommodation and really cheer them on. And oh my gosh, what an amazing thing to be able to do. It takes so many conditions to get it together. Hooray! Yeah, or someone's gonna like go do a second career, like my mom decided to go to law school when she was in her 40s. I don't know if that was a virtue or not. But, say it was medical school. I don't know if that's a virtue or not. Anyway, say it was something virtue. Celebrate it, celebrate it, celebrate it. Yeah. So rejoicing is the antidote to jealousy. That's an important thing to remember again and again. Rejoicing is the antidote to jealousy. And whenever there is good done, if you make it the habit of saying to yourself how wonderful it is they can do that, it really creates much more of that positive ambience in a community, so much more joy in your own life. So that's an important one to hang on to. So today we went through a few of the secondary vows, and we went through a few of the root vows. And your project, should you choose to accept it, is to think about equanimity. Really think about equanimity as this basis for bodhicitta. How do we keep unbiased goodwill, whether friend, enemy, or stranger? Yeah. And really like looking at, what does equanimity look like functionally, behaviorally in my daily life? Okay, so we'll go ahead and dedicate. Thank you all so much for your time and your thoughts. Did I not get the dedication screen up? Oh my gosh. There it is. Janchu Senjo Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyochi, Ke Pan Yamba Me Pa Yang, Gone Gondu Pelwa, Shotoni Dawa Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyochi, Ke Pan Yamba Me Pa Yang, Gone Gondu Pelwa, Sho. Thank you so much, everyone. Happy practicing.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody again.
Thank you
Please
very
remember
much.
to check out our calendar
Thank you.
for other events. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. See you next Thursday, especially. Oh, thank you. All in return. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
She's lovely.
Yes.